This is Standard 6.1, Part 2, using properties of exponents to simplify exponential expressions. If you haven't watched Part 1, please do so first, and then we'll continue with Part 2. So Part 2, we're looking at our next example, and this is going to use another property. In this particular example, we're going to use the negative exponent property. So the negative exponent property says the following. If you have a base raised to a negative exponent, it basically flips what you see. It becomes a fraction. It's 1 over b to the m. It takes your base and moves it to the other side of a fraction. The exponent becomes positive. Or let's say you have 1 over b to the negative m. This time your negative exponent's in the denominator. This negative exponent property says, okay, we're flipping it, we're moving back up to the top, the exponent becomes positive. So essentially the negative exponent moves your base to the other side of a fraction and it makes your exponent positive. So if we look here, I know it's tempting to take this negative 1 and distribute it into our sum. But although we are allowed to distribute into a product and a quotient, we're not allowed to distribute an exponent if you have addition or subtraction signs. So what we're going to have to do is work with what's inside the parentheses first. 2 plus 3 plus 4 is 9, so we have 9 to the negative 1 power. And the negative exponent property says we can make that as 1 over 9 to the positive 1 power, or essentially 1/9. Example 4 is a little bit different than example 3. Example 4, each of our bases have negative exponents. So what we're going to do is change this to 1/2, change this to 1/3, and change this to 1/4, and then we can add. So if you choose to, you can use your calculator to add. I can see that these all have a common denominator of 12, so this becomes 6/12, this becomes 4/12, this becomes 3/12, and then we can add to get 13/12. Example 5 looks a lot like the previous example. So if we go back to example 3, we have plus between the 2, 3, and 4. Here we have multiplication. So with multiplication, like we saw in our first video, the product to a power property, we are allowed to distribute this power to each factor in our product. So it becomes 2 to the negative 1 times 3 to the negative 1 times 4 to the negative 1, which is 1/2 times 1/3 times 1/4, and if we multiply across, we get 1/24. Example 6. So we're going to put some properties together again. Notice that the main operation here is division. We're dividing the numerator with the denominator. We can regroup, or we can group our numbers together. We can group our x's together. And we can group our y's together. Now we're allowed to do this because there's only multiplication separating the pieces of the numerator and the pieces of the denominator. If there's addition or subtraction connecting those things, we can't necessarily do that. Okay? All right, so if we look at our first group, 35 divided by 7 is 5. Our second group, when we are dividing, as we saw in our first video, we subtract our exponents. So negative 9 minus negative 5 is x to the negative 4th. And then we have y. We're subtracting our exponents again. 2 minus negative 3 is 5. Now this is almost simplified. The problem is that x has a negative exponent. So until all of our exponents are positive, this is not considered a completely simplified expression. 5 and y don't have negative exponents, so they're going to remain in the numerator of our fraction. X has a negative exponent, so it's going to move to the bottom and the exponent will be positive. This is our final, most simplified answer. Finally, our last example uses what's called the zero exponent property. And the zero exponent property says the following. Any base to the 0 power is equal to 1. Now you have to be a little careful. So for example, if you have 3 times mn to the 0 power, this doesn't all become 1. Only the portion that has the 0 exponent becomes 1. So this is 3 times 1, which is then 3. So similarly, what has the 0 power? It's 3x plus 2y. That whole expression becomes 1. And then 4 to the negative 2 becomes 1 over 16. Now, I know it's tempting to distribute the 0 in there, but we are not allowed to do that because we have a sum. We're only allowed to distribute if the operation is addition or subtraction. All right, so we have 1 plus 1/16, which is just 1 and a 16th, or if you want to change it to an improper fraction, 17 over 16. So this video, along with part 1, gives an overview of all the different properties of exponents with examples of each one.